This story is called Pond Hockey. 2 doors down from Penny lived Mr. Bennet. Mr. Bennet had been in the neighborhood since before Penny's family had moved in, nearly 20 years before. When they had first moved, Mr. Bennet still had his 2 sons living with him, who were close in age to Paul and Peter. Nowadays, Mr. Bennet lives alone, a quiet widower who is equally famous in the neighborhood for his lifelong presidency of the neighborhood block watch program and for the backyard hockey rink he has been building every year since his first son turned 6. Mr. Bennet's backyard rink was a thing of local legend. Although nobody in the neighborhood was there for any of the famous moments that seemed to have happened around it, nonetheless, everyone knew about the time his son's junior team had been locked out of their arena and ended up playing the opposing team in his backyard. Everyone knew that the league officials used samples of Mr. Bennet's ice to test the quality of the community rink against. And of course, everyone knows the infamous story of how Mr. Bennet converted his John Deere riding mower into a home-sized Zamboni, removing the mower deck and putting a scraper blade and a pair of water cooler jugs. What there was no arguing was that Mr. Bennet's rink was a thing you had to be impressed with. Complete with half-height boards, painted blue lines, a center face-off circle, and with hand-drilled net peg holes, Mr. Bennet's rink was the place for kids in the neighborhood. And Mr. Bennet, for his part, couldn't be happier with that arrangement. As common as the sight of kids playing shinny in the backyard was Mr. Bennet leaning over the boards, watching the game with a steaming thermos of coffee in his hands, and his worn Quebec Nordique toque on. Penny figured she had spent as many hours over the years learning the game on Mr. Bennet's rink as she had in actual arenas. It was there she first started to understand the etiquette and rules of how the game gets played in ways not written down in the rulebook. Mr. Bennet's rink followed a strict hierarchy for protecting players, with everyone from 16-year-old AA leaguers to 6-year-old Timbits kids still learning to skate, and mostly all playing at the same time. You had to learn how to play while watching out for the little guy. The older, bigger players would defer to playing defense or goal when the younger kids were there. You wouldn't check someone smaller than you unless they started in on you first. Everyone took turns digging pucks out of the snow or out of the alley, and you never told someone they couldn't play if they showed up with skates, a helmet, and a stick. With no referees, battles on Mr. Bennet's ice were free of the encumbrance of rules and stoppages that slowed down arena games. The game established a flow and a life that meant you could get the same ice time in over the course of an hour as an entire league game. The game also followed a natural law that put every player in the role of an official and enforcer. Penny remembered with painful embarrassment the time she'd hip-checked Kevin Miller, a full 2 years her junior, even if he was a boy and built like a farmer, over the boards and into the snowpack of Mr. Bennet's yard. Penny hadn't fully appreciated what had just happened and was carrying on with the play, but instantly all the other players stopped and split off, some coming at her shouting and the others hurrying over to check on Kevin. Penny got a stern lecture from one of Paul's teammates who had been on the ice that day. She had a responsibility for the safety of everyone, on her team and not, whenever she stepped on the ice. Penny, red-faced and hot with shame, had skated over to where Kevin had just been pulled back over the boards. He was assuring the other skaters around him that he was okay, though Penny could see he was breathing hard and sniffling back any more tears than were already streaming down his cheeks. Penny went up to apologize, but Kevin locked eyes with her and glared. "This isn't over," he told her, before she could start. A few minutes later, Penny picked up a pass from one of her teammates. She had turned her head to watch where the pass was coming from, and as soon as she felt the puck hit the tape on her stick, she looked back forward, just in time to see the arm coming at her. She looked away and took the blow to the side of her helmet, but the clothesline hit was enough to knock her flat on her back and completely wind her. She gasped, greedily gulping in air while her brain caught up with what had happened. Then Kevin's face appeared above her, inches away from her own. For a terrifying moment, Penny thought he was going to kiss her while she was helpless, but then he said, "Now we're even." before wiping the icy palm of his glove over her face in the universal sign of disrespect between hockey players of all levels. Mr. Bennett's ice had been host to hundreds, thousands probably, of these lessons over the years. Not just for Penny either. She was one of the many skaters to have crossed his ice over the years. When she was an adult, Penny had stumbled across a group of one of those social networking sites that were popular at the time. It was titled Bennett Ice Alumni, and the site's algorithm had recommended it because some of Penny's old teammates had already joined. Penny wasn't surprised to find when she joined that the group had over 500 members. The most lively discussion in the group centered around what had been the most epic game ever played on Bennett's rink. The discussion was about as unstructured as any online discussion, but it wasn't helped by the fact that Bennett's rink had been active for over 20 years, and many combinations of players from all ages had played together. The result were debates about as easy to moderate as which NHL team was best across different seasons. Penny knew that for her, it was an easy question, and there was no debate. Halloween when she was 14. It hadn't been anything anyone had organized. Nothing on Bennett's rink had ever been formal enough for that word to apply. Far as anyone could remember, someone gave up early on their trick-or-treat route and had their skate bag with them, so they stopped by to skate a few laps and take some shots. Someone else heard them when walking past Bennett's and decided to join, and, well, by the time Penny got there, the rink was going full tilt with enough costume skaters to be running 2 full teams with benched players tagging on and off every few minutes. The teams had loosely aligned to the costumes. One side was clearly the scary costumes. Notable contributors were a couple of zombies, a vampire, werewolf, 2 young kids in matching Frankenstein costumes and masks, and the goalie, on point in a Jason Voorhees mask, though Machete traded for a more useful goalie stick. The other side were the fun or sexy group. Nurses, firefighters, police, Ninja Turtles, and even a throwback to the 80s classic Rainbow Bright. Penny had been dressed as a witch. Like all the most memorable games, the score wasn't something Penny could remember, and it didn't matter. What mattered were the memories. Penny remembered with particular enjoyment the moment when Rainbow Bright and a teenage boy dressed in a sexy nurse costume got a breakaway from the Frankenstein twins and had put one top shelf over Voorhees' shoulder. As the players had started celebrating, there was a roar of applause and whistles, and all the players had stopped to look over and found that Bennett's yard was filled with the parents of the players, some in costume and some not, but all cheering and whistling for the kid with enthusiasm they never got to show at their games. When the players finally called it a game and began to leave the ice, it began to snow slightly, and the reunion of child and parent took on a decidedly festive feel to it. Most people who were there that night didn't get home until well past 11. Mr. Bennett had fired up his hot chocolate maker and started passing them around in little styrofoam coffee cups. An entire generation of neighborhood players gathered with their families, sipping hot chocolate in the snow, laughing and talking about the game they loved. That was what Penny would always consider the best game on Mr. Bennett's rink. Well, that was fun. It's the end of this Goon Girl story. Thanks for listening. I'll see you in the next one.